Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
The Ontario Liberal candidate Audrey Festeriga has now withdrawn her candidacy in Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
We always feel like we have an obligation to grow as much crop as possible. And when we see what's going on in the Ukraine and they're not able to export the wheat that they do have in bins, well, we just look at it as trying to maximize the growth potential of the crop.
A, B, S, O, L, U, T, I, O, N, absolution.
Thanks for joining us. We begin our election coverage tonight with a big blow to the provincial Liberal Party. Their candidate for Chatham-Kent-Leamington has withdrawn from the race. Audrey Festeriga was brought in as a replacement after the initial candidate was dropped by the Liberals for homophobic social media posts he made as a teenager. Then the NDP rang alarm bells, alleging election rules were violated when Festeriga was nominated. And now Festeriga says those, quote, attacks on her are the reason why she's stepping aside. Our Dale Molnar is on this story and joins me now live in studio. Dale, what is the Liberal Party saying about all this?
Well, Liberal leader Stephen Del Duca spoke to the media this afternoon, and he defended Festeriga's decision and her integrity. He also slammed the NDP and blamed leader Andrea Horwath for the attacks on Festeriga.
That Andrea Horwath and the Ontario NDP would be out there attacking a woman every single day, questioning her integrity, questioning her reputation, trying to do everything they can in the most despicable way imaginable is again appalling and unconscionable. And I think Andrea Horwath has an awful lot to answer for as it relates to how she has handled this situation.
So Dale, talk us through why they're laying the blame at the feet of the NDP.
Well, when Audrey Festeriga stepped in to fill the void left when Alec Masaryk was removed, they only had hours to file nomination papers to get on the ballot. So the NDP alleged the Liberals just took signatures it gathered for Masaryk and used them for Festeriga. The NDP complained to Elections Ontario and arguing that it went against election rules. Elections Ontario never confirmed if it was investigating the complaint, but fast forward to this afternoon when Audrey Festeriga opted out of the race. She declined to be interviewed, but issued a statement. It reads in part, "The desperate actions of the NDP and the McGregor campaign did not arise from any pure-hearted motivation, but rather a continued attempt to stop the voters from casting a ballot for the Liberals. Due to the NDP's relentless personal attacks, I have made the difficult decision to withdraw as the Liberal candidate for Chatham-Kent-Leamington in order to protect my family and my name." Now, the McGregor she refers to is Brock McGregor, the NDP candidate for in the riding, and former NDP MPP Taras Natashak has been calling for Festeriga's resignation, and she calls him out in the letter as well. Now, this afternoon, NDP leader Andrea Horwath came out with a statement to defend the NDP.
Making accusations against me is not the way that you take responsibility for your behaviors and your actions. You have to step up and show leadership by acknowledging when you've made a mistake, acknowledging that you've committed election fraud, and then promising never to do it again.
So Dale, Festeriga's name is already on the ballot because people have already voted in advance polls. So what happens now?
Well, that's right. Advance polls opened last week, so there are some people who have already voted for her for sure. Now, Elections Ontario just got back to me a little while ago, and they say if a candidate withdraws from the election after the ballots have been printed, a notice to voters, candidate withdrawal, is posted prominently on the wall behind the voting screens at all advance and election day polls. Elections Ontario says those notices have now gone out. Kat?
Thanks for this, Dale. That's CBC's Dale Molnar live in studio for us tonight. And we'll have more election coverage coming up in the show. But first, fallout from the war in Ukraine is being felt by Ontario farmers. The price of wheat is soaring as Russia blocks Ukraine grain exports. Less supply means higher prices. Bad news for both local farmers and consumers. Jacob Barker has more on that.
This wheat field in Essex County is more important than ever this year. The commodity is in high demand right now.
That new crop price of wheat today is around $13.72 a bushel. And, you know, that price about a year ago was $7, just a little bit over $7 a bushel.
That higher price, Cabas says, though, is driving down demand when it comes to animal feed.
Wheat always competes with the price of corn into a feed ration. So now that the price of wheat is considerably higher than the price of corn, it is being somewhat excluded out of those feed rations.
Cabas says the same goes for wheat exports and wheat that goes to mills.
The price has just gone extremely high.
Right now, more than 20 million tons of grain is stuck in silos at Ukrainian ports behind Russian blockades. Ontario farmers are working hard to fill that gap.
I feel in general we always have that moral responsibility that we feel to maximize what we can grow to have safe food for Ontario, for Canada, for the world.
The price of wheat was already rising coming out of the pandemic, and a wet fall led fewer farmers to grow the crop this season. Now, with the supply down globally, other costs will also be affecting the price that consumers are paying.
We are probably up, 30 to 40% on our overall freight costs. It's mainly due to fuel costs.
The price of fertilizer was also a big impediment. Much of the supply comes from Russia, and that was hit with a tariff by the federal government after the invasion began.
Fertilizer was already kind of a really high, expensive piece from last fall when we were looking at it. There were already some issues at play, and that's been kind of escalated based on what's happened in the Ukraine.
All this has created a perfect storm where consumers will likely eventually see higher prices for their bread.
There certainly is a lot of things in that chain that lead me to believe that the prices could be going up as we see with inflation, but I don't see that it being a reflection of just the farm cost in what's happening there. It's grocery stores, it's fuel, it's logistics, trucking, all those extra things.
The prices could still fluctuate before this crop is harvested in July. Right now, the forecast for goods that come from it are on the rise. Jacob Barker, CBC News, Essex County.
As we first reported last night, the Greater Essex County District School Board is launching a 5-year strategy to end anti-Black racism. The push to bring this about came from many in Windsor's Black community. And one of those people was Caitlin Ellsworth. She shared some of her experiences while attending school locally.
Growing up in the public school board in elementary, I was called the N-word. My brothers were called the N-word. We were one of only few Black students in the school. So for me, that included feelings of anxiousness, not wanting to enter the building, being somewhat prepared for something to happen, and so hyper vigilant to my surroundings. And that carried over into starting to work in the school board as well, actually.
The board is looking at more than 40 recommendations to tackle racism. Ellsworth is hopeful that all will be implemented. Back to election coverage now. There is 1 week left in the campaign. To take a look at what the polls are saying, we go to Eric Grenier. He is a poll analyst, a writer at the website The Writ, and he's CBC's poll tracker for this provincial election. So Eric, where do the parties stand at this point in the campaign?
Well, pretty much where they stood at the beginning of the campaign. We haven't seen a lot of movement either way. In our poll tracker, which is an aggregation of all the polls that are being published during this campaign, we have the PC still leading with about 36% support. The Liberals are in second with about 27%, and the New Democrats have about 24%. So we're looking at really a 9-point gap still for the PCs, pretty much what we've seen throughout this campaign. That's bigger than the margin of victory they had over the New Democrats back in 2018. So we'd still expect that if the election were held today, it would be another PC majority government.
And the PCs are on track for that majority, as you say, but the poll tracker still says there's a chance that the party could fall short. So what factors could influence the PC's chances of getting a second majority government?
Well, there's always a possibility, of course, that their numbers will just come down over the last week, but 36% isn't a huge amount for majority government. And if things don't really go their way in a lot of ridings in certain regions of the province where they just come up short, then it's possible that they could dip below the 63 seats needed for a majority government. But we would probably need to see some sort of error in the polls at this stage or some movement in this last week, because that gap between the PCs and the Liberals, and the fact that the Liberal support is not very well distributed across the province, means that the PCs are in a pretty good spot. But, we still have to go through the votes and still have to have election day, and we'll see what happens.
And what about the race for second place? How close are the Liberals and the NDP?
Yeah, the Liberals are in second place in the polls. That has been consistent throughout the campaign, and we do have the Liberals ahead of the New Democrats in the polling average. But in terms of the seat count, it is still actually an interesting race because the New Democrats have much more concentrated support. You know, they have support in the Southwest, support in Northern Ontario, Hamilton, parts of Toronto. And so where they do have some support, they're able to win seats. The Liberals are a bit less able to do that because of how spread out their support is. So if we had a best guess, you'd probably say the Liberals would finish second in the vote, but probably third in the seats at this stage.
And Liberals had just 7 seats after the 2018 election. Is it surprising to see them rebounding like this?
Well, the Liberal brand is a very strong brand. We've seen that Justin Trudeau was able to take the federal Liberal Party from a historic worst result in 2011 to a majority government in 2015. So it is a resilient brand. And the 2018 election was a very specific one. The Liberals had been in power for 15 years at that point. Kathleen Wynne was pretty unpopular. And so there was a movement towards the NDP among voters who had in the past voted for the Liberals. But it does seem that this being a bit more of a normal election, you could say, that a lot of those voters who have traditionally voted Liberal have gone back to the party. Still, they have a lot of ground to make up on the PCs if they're going to challenge them for government.
And turning to things locally here, in 2018, the NDP won handily in Windsor, Tecumseh, and Windsor West. Is the NDP doing enough to protect those seats this time around?
Yeah, they won those ridings by 20, 30 points, so they are pretty safe ones. And I think that the New Democrats are counting on winning the 2 Windsor seats as they try to hold on to the official opposition role and push the PCs for government. If we did see the New Democrats playing a bit more defense during this campaign, maybe Andrea Horwath would have spent a little bit more time in the Windsor area. But if the NDP is losing Windsor Tecumseh or Windsor West, they're in a lot of trouble. So I think that they're hoping that that's not 2 seats that they have to worry about.
And what about Essex? It was a closer race there in 2018. Could it flip?
Yeah, that's a seat that the New Democrats do have to worry about. They only won it by about 6 points last time. And we've seen that the federal Conservatives have won Essex over the last 2 federal elections. The NDP vote has really dropped there. And when you're looking at the polls that we've seen in southwestern Ontario, which is a bigger region, it doesn't just include Windsor-Essex, we have seen that the PC vote has largely held up from 2018 and the NDP vote has come down. So the New Democrats, they don't have an incumbent there. They could be in trouble in Essex. The 2 Windsor ridings, though, that would be more of an upset if they lost either of them.
Thanks for this, Eric. That's Eric Grenier. He's a poll analyst, a writer at the website The Writ, and he will be running CBC's poll tracker for this election. To the U.S. now, videos have emerged from Tuesday's school shooting in Texas that shows parents imploring police to storm the building. Today, though, police said tactical units were needed for an assault and that the rescue operation was immediate.
They don't make entry initially because of the gunfire they're receiving. But we have officers calling for additional resources. Everybody that's in the area. So during that time that they're making those calls to bring in help to solve this problem and stop it immediately, they're also evacuating personnel. When I say personnel, students.
In one video, a parent is heard saying the shooter had been inside an hour. Police today confirmed an hour had passed. They also said the gunman entered the school unimpeded. Reports suggest most, if not all, of the 19 people killed were shot in the first few minutes of the attack. Let's turn now to a developing situation in Toronto. Several schools went into lockdown this afternoon. Police responding to a call about a man with a rifle walking down a street. Chris Ensing is following this story for us and joins me now live in studio. Chris, what's the latest?
Yes, Kat, we can tell you now that police say that the suspect was killed in this incident. Police were called at 1 p.m. To Scarborough area of Toronto, and there you see on the map is where they found a suspect in his late teens, early 20s, who they found walking through the street. Many schools were put on lockdown. They were lifted in about an hour. No threat to public safety, but police confirming that the suspect was killed. The Special Investigations Unit has now launched an investigation as well. They say that 2 officers fired their handguns, that the suspect died on scene and was found with a long firearm. Now, the chief of police not saying much about why this person was carrying a weapon, saying the investigation is ongoing, not speculating about any motive. They don't have any indication of why this person was doing that at the time, but a lot of questions considering what we just heard about what's going on in Texas.
And Chris, what are we hearing from students?
Yeah, the initial reaction from some of the parents on the scene there, you could hear how terrified they were when they talked about the comments of responding to something like this, hearing that their children were in school during a lockdown and that there was somebody with a weapon. The students also spoke about what this felt like for them. Here's what they said.
I was just like worried that we were gonna die because once I heard those gunshots, it really freaked me out.
Yeah, it was pretty scary though. Like, my heart was beating really fast. For the first 5 minutes, I thought it was a drill, but after that, it was an hour of lockdown.
There was like someone shaking on the door, and I was terrified.
They were checking the doors.
Yeah, they were checking the doors.
Knowing about this person with that is armed, it feels like we're gonna shoot the school.
Now, the chief of police saying that 2 of the officers were taken to hospital, but they're fine now, saying no physical injuries for anyone outside of the suspect who they do report has been killed. They say that they do know that some are dealing with mental injuries because of this incident. Cap.
Thanks for this, Chris. The CBC's Chris Enzing live in studio for us tonight. Let's take a live look outside there. We've had on and off showers all day, and we do have more on the way. And Colette will be here after the break with more. And also coming up in the show, we'll tell you about 2 Windsor students off to compete in a major spelling bee. Stay with us. Welcome back. 2 Windsor Elementary School students are all abuzz. They are off to Washington, D.C. this weekend to compete in the Scripps National Spelling Bee. Dale Molnar met up with them to see how they're gearing up for the big trip.
Absolution. A, B, S, O, L, U, T, I-O-N, absolution.
That's 11-year-old Isabella Cowan competing in the Windsor Family Credit Union Regional Spelling Bee in March. She won.
Well, my winning word was edification, E-D-I-F-I-C-A-T-I-O-N. I'm very excited. I'm very proud of myself. I'm also very surprised. I didn't think I could make it this far.
Now she and runner-up Zayn Malik are off to compete for $50,000 in the Scripps National Spelling Bee. The WFCU gave them a send-off with backpacks full of swag for inspiration. They'll need it. There will be 230 competitors from across the continent.
I'm going to try and stay calm and relax and breathe and take my time and make sure I'm aware of everything, of every letter that I say, because I can't change it once it comes out of my mouth. So I'm going to try and do my best.
How did they get to this point? Hard work and practice.
I'm just starting to practice the words every single day for about an hour and having someone test me so I can just visualize the words. And when I did tested them, I ready for them because I already heard them before someone asked me them.
They were given a list of words they would have to know for the regional spelling bee, but for the national competition, they'll have to be ready for any word in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. And if the Canadian spelling isn't in there, they'll have to know the American one. Cowan's mom says Isabella has been working hard to prepare.
While some of her friends were on vacation, and rightly so, during March break, she was studying every single day, so she comes by it honestly.
And what's the toughest word 13-year-old Zayn has had to spell? The word for a disease caused by exposure to volcanic ash.
Non-literal microstrap is literal volcanotoniosis. PNEUMONOULTRAMICROVOLCANOCONIOSIS.
That's easy for him to say. Good luck, kids. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
Colette Kennedy's here now for a look at our weather forecast. But Colette, before we get to weather, I just have to acknowledge that final word. It's like, how long is this word? When is it going to end? Yeah, that's amazing. Good for them. And which reminds me, the rain. When is the rain going to end?
Yeah, well, we've kind of got waves of it because it's such a large and complex system that we're dealing with. And with that spelling, it wasn't even that he spelled it. It looked like a run-on sentence. It was how quickly. I'd be like, okay, wait, how many letters did I give? Okay, where am I at in the word? Now, you know how that goes. Do you know how this goes? I think you do. Southwestern Ontario, when we start to see the dew points coming up, that moisture content in the air, then things start to feel differently, right? It happens every summer, and we're getting towards that point where things become oppressive, but we're not there yet. It is still just the end of May. So into that range where we're kind of knocking on that door. These are the current dew points, 19. We were at 20 here in Windsor. We've got 17s and 18s we're seeing. So kind of puts us in that becoming uncomfortable, right? Becoming muggy there. So there's a look at our current temperatures. Because of the waves of rain, brings them down a little bit as they work their way through. At times, those winds kind of breezy from the south. And then the humidex, well, there's another indicator of how things are feeling. Not quite at 30, though. So, yeah, most folks can take that, and we see much worse as we get into July and August. So this is one band, but I just kind of want to show you just how broad the system is, anchored back still towards the Midwest, a very, very extensive frontal boundary, and so this is why it's sort of in waves it's coming through. So we have more coming through this evening, and we will get some breaks in between and into the overnight. And then, I have to tell you, we may just get tagged through the Windsor area, not necessarily all of southwestern Ontario. That will bring in some significant rainfall. By the time we get to Saturday morning, we're out of this, but just know off and on we're going to be seeing this rolling through for the next 24 to 36 hours. The weekend is looking great, though. 16 overnight tonight, tomorrow 22, Saturday. Look at this. Look at that weekend. And then, boys, the heat coming. Will there be humidity with it? Yes, into next week. But we get a couple of days where things feel just a little bit more comfortable on that graph. And those days happen to be our Saturday and our Sunday.
Oh, that looks amazing. Thanks for that, Colette.
You're welcome.
When we come back, we have an update on the monkeypox situation in Ontario for you. Stay with us.
Home.
Toronto health officials said today they have identified the first case of monkeypox in the city. It comes as Quebec prepares to become the first province to launch a monkeypox vaccination program. Health officials say there are 25 confirmed cases of monkeypox in the Montreal area and dozens more possible cases under investigation.
If you give it within 4 days, you have a very good effectiveness in preventing the illness. If you administer it between day 5 and 14, it might not prevent disease, but it might modify the evolution.
The province announced it could start administering shots as soon as tomorrow after it received doses of the smallpox vaccine from the federal government. Vaccines will be given to people who have been in close contact with confirmed cases. Studies on animals show the vaccine can prevent monkeypox within 4 days of exposure or reduce severe symptoms if given from day 5 to 14. Officials say it will not be administered to those who already have an active case of the virus. A killer whale has been spotted again in the waters of the Seine River in France, and authorities say it needs to get back to the sea as soon as possible. The 4-meter orca was first spotted about 10 days ago at the mouth of the river. It's traveled dozens of kilometers since then, but wildlife officials say the whale's dorsal fin is bent, which is a sign it's in poor health. They don't want to try to move the mammal because they're afraid it would stress the animal further. But they say the killer whale needs to return to the sea where it can find food sources. Nothing quite so dramatic on the Detroit River, but if you were out earlier today, you may have spotted this large American naval ship. The vessel is USS Minneapolis St. Paul, a Freedom variant combat ship. It's currently on its way to Mayport, Florida, where it will be stationed. Always love seeing the big ships along the river. That is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/Windsor. Thanks so much for watching and have a good night.